Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Rocket Lab Weekly. This is episode 28, and we have a special guest, Scotto. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is a quite interesting week. The last 2 weeks have not been so exciting for Rocket Lab, but this week there was a lot of news. We have gotten new contracts. We have maybe gotten a contract cancellation. We have Electron maybe reflying, and there's a lot of new scenarios on how many launches they're going to be in Q2 if this contract really fell out. So we have a lot to cover from Rocket Lab. But because you're a new guest, Scott, I'm very interested. I really like your videos. By the way, Scott's data is in the description box below if you want to follow him on Twitter and on YouTube. I really recommend that you watch his channel. He has amazing numbers and presentation. And lately, you had a new studio and very good editing also, right?
Yeah, thank you. A lot of green screen and everything.
Wow, nice. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? How did you find out about Rocket Lab, and what do you do? Yeah.
So I'm almost 35. I'm 35 next week. I'm a fairly new dad. Little girl is 14 months now, so that's a lot of work, as you know.
Yeah.
As far as my association with Rocket Lab, I guess I guess it goes all the way back to 2018. I was invested in Tesla, and kind of by proxy with that association with the Elon Musk umbrella, kind of became enamored with SpaceX, but obviously you can't, it's not a public company. So it kind of sent me on the quest for what's the next best thing. And I guess at the time it started with, I think Virgin Galactic was the space stock, not including like the, military stocks, Lockheed Martin, Aerojet, Rocketdyne, etc. But for obvious reasons, the Virgin Galactic thing was maybe worth avoiding. And so that was right around the time that Rocket Lab and Astro both were going public. So I opened up a position in, I think it was on the same day I bought into Astro and Rocket Lab, I think both at $10. So Astro was already public and Rocket Lab was about to be a public company. And throughout that kind of adventure, it showed itself pretty quickly which of these two companies was more enduring, and just been kind of fascinated with Rocket Lab since. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I'm really curious when you invested in Astro, because it's always very easy, with the benefit of the hindsight, to see that, okay, this company was not going to make it. Like, when you invested, what did they look like? What was their promise? What was I'm just very curious, because I read the Ashley Vance When the Heavens went on sale, and I didn't get very impressed with their company culture. And then when I started following the space equities and stocks, like, they were already basically failing, so I'm just curious what they looked like when they just de-spec'd.
I'm looking at the launch tracker. I was tracking all the small launchers, and Astro's kind of dried up by now, but I think at the time they had, it looks like 5 or so launches. And so yeah, at the time it was kind of like, having watched SpaceX and having watched really any rocket company, they're never successful on the first go around, right? So I was kind of like, well, the market is looking at this like, they failed, so they're going to fail again, so they're going to fail again. I mean, you watch the Starship stuff now, and it's like, you see you watch the, people on X, and they're like, oh, this was great, they reached orbit and whatnot. And then you go over to mainstream media, and they're like, it was disaster, this is the end of Elon, and etc. So it's kind of like, at the time I was looking at Astro like, no, they're not failing after, like, it's not failure after failure after failure. Each time they're closer to success. Once that starts happening, this is going to be a flywheel of like, all these launches. And I mean, you saw what they were promising.
Yeah.
But then after, I wish I could think of the exact example, but there was a few things that it was more to do with management than the actual like execution. Oh, yeah, one of the things was Chris Kemp mentioning that he was like the CTO of NASA or something. But then if you do a bit of digging, it was like, no, he was, I can't remember the exact term, but it was like, do you ever watch The Office?
No.
Okay, there's a bit, some of the viewers will know, but it's like how Dwight is the assistant to the regional manager, but he crosses the thing out and he's like, no, I'm the assistant manager. And he's like, no. Yeah, it's probably funny if you see the show, but that's what it reminded me of. And I was like, that's not entirely honest there. And there was enough red flags like that. I mean, including the CFO dumping all her shares. And I'm like, well, you guys aren't going to hold the company. Why should I,
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm planning a Rocket Lab video about a very old video with Peter Beck. And then he was like, yeah, we bet the company on this rocket launch, and like every part was like just enough to make it go right. And if any pressure, anything was a little bit off, and we bet the company on that one. And if that launch doesn't go well, we're bankrupt, And I remember how touched I was on Elon Musk's story about, like the 3 Falcons failing and everything was hanging on the 4th launch. Otherwise, they go bankrupt. And it feels like every rocket company has the same exact story. It's like we bet the whole company on this machine, and then it either flies or we die.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. So let's begin with the Rocket Lab news for this week. The first one is that let's start with this one. I think this is the smaller contract. No, this is the bigger contract that they have gotten. So they got a $32 million contract to design and manufacture spacecraft to conduct a rendezvous proximity operations. And then they have to so they have to design the spacecraft, and then they will have a 24-hour notice to launch it for the Space Systems Command. What did you think when you saw this contract?
I mean, good news, obviously. As far as the time for, this was the one for 2025, right? Yeah. So, I mean, good news, of course. I was a little unclear with, what's the other company? They're making the Jackal, True Anomaly, I guess.
Yeah.
I was a little unclear at first if Rocket Lab was building that craft as well. And I mean, I guess I'm still a little unclear with like, if I like, from my understanding is the Jackal will be launched on, I think, a SpaceX ride. And then from there, Rocket Lab is having to like launch at a particular point in time and then kind of interact with that spacecraft. So it seems to me like True Anomaly kind of has the easy route, and Rocket Lab will kind of be kind of chasing after it. Kind of like what we saw with the Astro scale mission, where there's like a particular item in space that we have to go interact with. So it's going to be a pretty technical mission. I think that's why there's a bit of a price hike for the overall, the price tag of the mission, right?
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about this, that it's a technology demonstration mission. So I can, I'm a big Palantir investor, and they also have sometimes a demonstration project, which then turn into much bigger contracts, like once the tech is proven. So I was like, the two, because the dollar amount of the contract is not earth shattering. It's a nice amount, but it doesn't do that much for Rocket Lab. Let's I mean, that's just a fact on the $32 million. But what is really good is that if this is a demonstration mission, like maybe this can turn into a much larger contract. And then number 2 is that they again seem to be getting paid for R&D. I had to ask ChatGPT to explain to me what this rendezvous proximity operation is, and it's basically when 2 spacecraft like dock in space together, because for those of the viewers who are not super space technical, when you're in orbit, you're flying at like 27,000 kilometers per hour, which is like 10 times the speed of the bullet. So to dock with that thing, you need to go up to that speed. And I guess it's a very delicate technical thing to not go faster, not go slower, don't crash into this unit. And I guess this enables a lot of future technology for Rocket Lab, because you can do orbital refueling. You can, if there is a payload coming from the moon or something that is not supposed to land, you can dock to it and then maybe bring down mass. And I thought that was also very, very positive with this contract.
And not only that, but my understanding is this is on the Pioneer spacecraft, so it's kind of already building on another project that the R&D was basically paid for already. So I think the margins will be pretty healthy overall, not just on the launch side, but on the spacecraft side of this one as well.
Yeah, exactly. I actually forgot to mention that it was on the Q1 earnings call when they announced the 4 different buses. And this is like a proof of concept that like this contract is sort of a proof of concept that they are going in the right way, that they divided it up and they are selling space systems and launch together as a one-stop shop. So that's also So overall,
go ahead. Do you mind if I jump in before we move on? I'm just kind of looking at my notes as well. And I think it was during Q3, they mentioned there's that one craft for a classified constellation customer, and in particular, it was a Pioneer. Do you think that this is that Pioneer, or do you think this is like technically number 6? The other 4 Pioneer being the 4 Varda spacecraft.
Ooh, I actually don't know. I don't know.
I wonder if this is a new one, like a brand new one, or if this was kind of like. I mean, if they announced it, I guess that would have had to be on backlog, and would that have to be announced already, I guess? Or
yeah, your knowledge on this is more detailed than mine, so I don't know. Yeah, cool. So, and then the next one, the next news, this one actually caught me quite by surprise, and that's that this Electron rocket is now getting ready to fly again. For the first time, a recovered Electron stage has been returned to the production line to undergo final acceptance qualification testing in preparations for spaceflight. And in another tweet, maybe I don't have that one, they are listing out all the checks that this Electron has been through. The reason why this is so surprising is because Adam Spice specifically said at a space conference that they're only going to have 2 what is it, like landing attempts for Electron, and they're not focusing on reflying this year. And I got the cynical thing inside me that I'm like, is there something wrong with Neutron? And then they had to like create good news for the investors, and then they like pulled this ahead of schedule instead? Or did this happen because the quality of this booster, and when they did all the tests, it was just much better than all of them anticipated? So curious to hear your thoughts on this.
This is one of those things where I don't know what to think, because we went from 9 recoveries, I think it was, from that manifest from the Q3 results to like 2. And then Adam Spice was even on those one of those conferences talking about how well this particular recovery went, but then that was just kind of it. And now this news kind of came out of nowhere, and kind of to what you said, I'm like, is this just kind of to give investors hope, like hang on, it's still in the back of our minds, don't worry about it? Or is this like, were they kind of sandbagging? I don't know. I really don't know what to think with the recovery stuff too. And it doesn't help that during that last conference call, or the last earnings call, there was just nobody was asking the questions about it. They're just so worried about Neutron. But I'm like, guys, like, ask about the recoveries, what's happening, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's looking good as far as when this one actually reflies. I'm unclear because I think it was in that same conference too. He mentioned that they're still planning to do the nine recovered Rutherfords on an engine before they fly the full
Yeah.
booster, right?
Yeah.
So this, I guess this is still for next year, right? The full booster.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that they reflew one engine, right?
Yeah.
And could they have gotten, such good data on the engine that they're like, we don't need to fly 9 more engines?
Mm-hmm.
I really hope this is going to come up in the earnings call.
It just came to mind, like maybe maybe it's wishful thinking, but do you think that as a way to kind of reduce the cost for the Venus mission, because that's not a revenue producing mission, I mean, unless maybe there's an extra payload added or something, do you think that they maybe put this booster back on the pad with 9 reused Rutherfords, and if something bad happens, it's kind of like, it doesn't matter because it's not for a customer?
I mean, it would be extremely smart if they did that.
It'd be a good way to start the new year.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that is very interesting to me is when you do all these tests. I mean, I'm not in the rocket industry, right? But I'm like, when you have done they said it was the engine test, the pressurization test, the helium leak test. I'm thinking that that it must be very close. Like, then why do you wait a year to launch this? So I'm really, I really hope the earnings is in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So we should be hearing a lot more about this soon.
Mm-hmm. Let's hope so.
Yeah, but overall, we know that to get the 50% gross margin on the Electron, like 2 things are needed: the cadence and the reuse. And what I was really happy to see is we sort of have cadence now, even though the launch is quite lumpy. We see that it's going very good with the launches. And if we start reusing the rocket, then we really start to actually see nice margins finally on this part of Rocket Lab.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Now we go to the next one. This one is a smaller contract that they have won. This is for the Space Force, a $15 million contract where they are going to fly. I clicked on something here. Yeah, this is the link. So what did you think about this contract? This really doesn't seem to be a reoccurring contract. It's not a proof of contract, so it's just a $15 million contract.
What is the question that I have with this one is, my understanding is that they're launching as the primary payload, is what they said, is 1 disk sat, which, unless I've completely misunderstood, they're like a very lightweight craft or satellite, right? Like they're only like 2 to 10 kilograms. But I think it was the release that the Space Force put out. They mentioned that the overall payload is going to be 200 kilograms with 3 other payloads. So it's odd that there would be that the disk sat is called the primary payload, despite it being like 1% or like less than 5% of the overall mass of the payload. Or there's something there that like hasn't been announced that I'm curious about, I guess.
Yeah, I have seen this also with SpaceX, that you have sometimes classified payloads, and then they are like, that's one way for the military to hide things, is that you group them together with other launches, and then so it's and also the price of this the Electron is 8.1 million usually, and this one is a much higher price for an Electron launch. So I think your suspicion might be very well based on this.
I'm curious too what they mean when they say very low Earth orbit, and like what that means as far as how fast they need to be going, and like what kind of like how, I'm curious about the height and how long too the disk sats will be in orbit for. Like what kind of refresh rate we can expect if these all go forward. Because if you look at the blueprints, for lack of a better term, for these disk sats, these are like they're built for Electron. Like I think that it's not like exactly, but it's like looking at the blueprints, you're like, that's an Electron fairing. That's an Electron size. They mention like they talk about the Electron without talking about the Electron. So it's like the perfect size for it. And I'm like, well, how often can we expect this kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's true, because in already in Leo, like, so the again for the viewers, like you have geostationary orbit, which is about 36,000 kilometers away from Earth, and there you have zero atmospheric drag. If you put an object there, it pretty much stays there until the battery dies. In low Earth orbit, which is, as far as I understand, in the hundreds of kilometers, I think the space station is 500 kilometers over sea level, you have a slight drag from the atmosphere. So that means that you still have orbital speeds, but you have to continuously course correct, and then your spacecraft dies the minute you run out of fuel, because then you deorbit. And then when you go into very low Earth orbit, as far as I understand, your lifespan is even shorter, because you have much more atmospheric drag. So it could be that some object in V Leo is maybe a few months. And obviously, the further out you are from Earth, the more the launch cost, and the tougher it is to get there. So GTO missions, I think that many times you need the Falcon Heavy to take the satellites up there, whereas the Leo missions, it's Electron, Falcon 9, any like many rockets can do that, and VLEO is even simpler. So if this thing only lives for a few months, or let's say to 1 year, then and they want to have this whatever function this disk set does, then they have to continuously replenish it, and that would be very good for Rocket Lab.
Mm-hmm.
Tanda Madison commented that NASA has a nice write-up on the advantages and reasons for the disk set approach. Do you think you could send us the link in the comments, and then we could look at it and maybe mention it in the next video? Sorry, now that I looked at the comments, I saw another one that maybe we could have a look at. Manos fan, increased geopolitical tensions going on. Any chance Rocket Lab may get fresh military contracts from this? Satellites are the ultimate eyes in the sky. What is your thoughts regarding this?
Yes is the quick answer. Yeah, absolutely. As far as like, I want to say this without sounding like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but when I was looking at those space companies that I mentioned earlier, a big part of why I didn't go with like Lockheed Martin or any of those other guys is kind of like adult content or tobacco or alcohol. Or war in this case. It's like, yeah, there's money to be made, but at the end of the day, when your clock is running out and your little grandchildren are around you, like, so what did you do? The last thing I want to say is like profited off war. And that's like something that I've always admired about Rocket Lab is their like no weapons approach, right? But that has kind of been not like I don't know if you call it a red flag, but it's definitely not. I'd say it's more on the table than ever before, especially with Haste and I've talked about this too in like Discord or whatever, and people have pushed back, rightfully so, that it doesn't really make sense for Haste. For if anyone's unfamiliar, it's like the Electron, except instead of going up to space delivering a payload, it basically goes from one part of land to the ocean. But it's not hard to imagine how that could be reconfigured into having something malicious in the fairing, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the state of unease around the world right now. And and there's that fine line. Like, I don't want to just be the tree hugger here, being like, no war ever whatsoever. Like, I don't like fighting, but I train in jujitsu, right? And it's not because I want to go out on the street and fight people. It's that if there's ever a moment where there's a situation that needs to be handled, it's going to need to be handled, right? So you can't just be docile. And I understand both sides, but it's just that balance of not wanting to support the military industrial complex, but also just supporting a company that's doing cool things. And yeah, I made a whole video about Planet Labs with kind of the same overarching theme of like, the technology is going to exist regardless of who has it. You just need to make sure it's in the right hands, I guess.
Yeah. Look, I totally understand you on this one, because when I invested in Palantir, like, a large part of their funding is from the military, and that was also something for me that is like, I don't want to profit from war, and my logic on it is that on Palantir, for example, the founder talks a lot about that their purpose is peace, and then they want to be a deterrent. Like, they want the West to be so efficient and so good that no wars will take place, because you don't want to like fight with such a and like, I could buy that, because I felt that like, as you said, that like the military is going to happen anyways, and this technology is going to be around anyways. And then like, if somebody is going to develop an AI army and AI tech for the army, like, I rather like that the US develops it, and especially a company that is very firm on their like that this is for peace, than China or Russia would develop it, because I don't have the confidence that they would have the same viewpoint on it, and again, like for example, this like Rocket Lab has a lot of military support for different technologies, and this, for example, the one that we looked at before, it was this rendezvous and orbit. Like, it's basically a defense thing. It's not even an attacking thing. It's like, if there is threats from space, then they can go to that spacecraft and do something with it, and react to it. So, and I know what you're talking about, because that's also the same reason why I also didn't look at Lockheed and the other military contractors. So we're on the same page. But yes, probably to answer this comments question, the fact that there is instability, it gives the military bigger budgets, and then the bigger budgets, they find ways where to spend the money, and probably quite some money is going to go to Rocket Lab to develop technologies and readiness and so forth.
Definitely, yeah.
Cool. So now we go to the next news. I mean, just want to mention this. I don't know how much you have seen this or know about this. I know very little about this space symposium that is in California, which is apparently the biggest networking event for the space industry. And Rocket Lab was there. They were networking with a lot of people. And they had an Archimedes engine there that seems to be a life-size Archimedes engine. And then I tweeted that, is this why we don't get the Archimedes test? Because they had to bring the engine here and show it, which was obviously a joke. Do you know anything about the space symposium? Do you think should we go more into it, or yeah?
Actually, yeah, I have a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt. But I've heard somebody told me that they were able to go speak with Peter Beck directly, and they
At the Space
mentioned
Symposium.
yes, yeah, and they mentioned they asked him two questions. The first is, what do you think about the I'm drawing a blank on the name. The solar from space. Are you familiar with that concept? It's like a big constellation beams down solar energy to the Earth.
Yeah.
Basically said it's stupid. Said it's a bad idea. So that's one of those, like, are they going to do that for their constellation? So it sounds like we can rule it out, assuming the rumor is true. Again, take it with a grain of salt. And the other thing that was asked is, you keep mentioning neutron on the pad or neutron launching in the year. What does this mean? What is it? And he said, launching. So again, it's rumor, but maybe it's clarification. I don't know.
Okay. But he didn't. Okay. But he didn't ask him, like, still launching, still, like, are you still on time? Where is the Archimedes engine?
It sounded like he's still planning to launch still this year.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's very interesting because based on your videos, I can see you're quite knowledgeable in, like, or you know a lot of details about this. I'm, how do you call it? Like, I'm in between what to believe, because I know that Rocket Lab has an incentive to have a credible path to launch this year, because then they can potentially be awarded a lot of contracts. And even if they miss this date and the launch is happening Q1 or Q2 or Q3, it's sort of like it's a rocket. Like, everybody writes it off as, yeah, like this happens in the space industry, right? So they have a lot of incentives to have that timeline. But on the other end of the dime, Adam Spice talked about it, and Peter Beck talked about it many times, that the rocket has like 4 different development that has to happen at the same time. You know, it's the infrastructure, you have the engine, and then it was I think it was the structure and the tanks, and everything is on target except for the engine. But Peter Beck has mentioned that the engine is the least innovative part of the rocket, and it's like they're not trying any new technology, and even the engine, they're not planning to run it at full throttle. So if you're because you know, like, the engine can, you know, blow up, burn up, you know, different mishaps that can happen, but they usually happen when you push the engine to the maximum, right? But they're planning to run the engine at like 10%. And then I can kind of buy this, that like the delay is okay, because it's like none of the technologies that they're trying is new, and they're anyways not going to have the engines on max throttle, and all the other parts of the rocket is happening simultaneously, and it's not a big issue. But then I can also buy the other side, that, you know, Firefly and Stoke Space and all of these have the engines already tested, and their rockets are being, like, the plan is that they should fly in 2026. And, you know, then how is Rocket Lab thinking that they're not even done with the engine test, but they're like trying to fly this year? So very curious about your thoughts on this.
Oh man, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like, I don't know what to think anymore. It's like I want to trust management, especially when they say like it's the least difficult part, so don't worry about it. Devil's advocate of that is like, if it's so simple, where is it?
Yeah,
Right? Exactly. Like, what's going on with it? But I have a good feeling that we're going to get an update. I mean, we'll definitely get an update on the call either way, and I'm really hoping that it's going to be similar to when we got the Q4 results. We got that video, like, introducing the spacecraft family. I think they're going to do something similar with that, but it's going to be like, ideally, the hot test fires are like, here's the results, everything's going well. But at the same time, I can't remember if it was Firefly or Relativity, but they mentioned that they just finished weeks-long testing of their engines. And I'm like, well, if it's going to be similar for Rocket Lab, it's not just going to be like a one hot fire and like, okay, everything's good, let's put it on the Neutron and away she goes, right? It's going to be like weeks. So if it's starting testing later this month, like, does that bring us out till like May or June even? Because now we're in second half of the year and it's just getting pushed back.
Maybe it's already testing. Maybe it's already testing. We just don't know about it.
Because the stand was supposed to be like early April, I guess, was the latest for the stand being ready, right? So in theory, it's on the stand now, I guess. Hopefully,
Yeah.
or
I
at the Symposium.
I get this. What do you call? Yeah, exactly. It's at the Symposium. I get a lot of tweets. Whenever there's a launch, or there's a picture of wallops, I always Francisco Ramirez. He always sends them to me, and then he's like, "Look, you can see the neutron pad like behind," and then he's trying to see if there is like neutron things, but the pictures don't really show it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way,
did you happen to see that? I don't know who the guy was, but he took a photo like on the ground of Wallops, Virginia. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
It's like it gives a pretty good idea of where they're at, I guess, as far as like the infrastructure for the pad.
Do you mean is this guy who shares satellite images from the?
No. Here, give me 1 sec. Here, where did I save that?
Yeah, you see how you can share, right?
I think so. Or can I just put it in the chat there?
Yeah, you can also share your screen if you want to, and then we can. While you're doing that, I just want to say that Christopher Bell, he's here on basically every Rocket Lab Weekly, and he's a very appreciated member of this community, and he lives very near Wallops, and he's commented, "Yup, Neutron is on schedule. Archimedes engines are looking to be a done deal now and are ahead of schedule at Wallops." I know he has some special comm lines or rumor lines, so I'm curious if he could. If Christopher, you could write like where you got this from. If it's true, it's fantastically exciting.
There we go. Can you check your message on X there? I sent you the photo there.
1 sec. Yeah, I can share the tab.
Yeah, so that's from ground level. So it gives us a decent idea. It looks like there's all the structures there, just the concrete's ready to be poured. So
yeah,
and that was taken like a week or so ago. So
yeah. Did you see this like when it came up that they're misrepresenting this FUD? That they're misrepresenting the timeline, and they said that the concrete is not even it is scheduled to be finished in December, and then they still have to like build things on the site, and then how would they be able to launch by the end of December? What do you think about? Because I think that the point of Neutron is that there is there's not a lot of infrastructure around, and it basically connects to the pad from below, as far as I understand. So the concreting is the very last thing to get done, and if it's done in November and they want to launch in December, it does seem to work out.
I mean, the way that Adam Spice phrased the first Neutron is minimum viable product. So
yeah,
they could the concrete that's going to be poured for the first one is probably not the final setup. Kind of similar to what we saw with SpaceX. Like they blew up the entire launch pad, right? And it's like we could probably expect something similar with Neutron. So whether that's like, I don't know if they'll have like a primary launch pad and then like a proper one, kind of like what we saw in New Zealand, how they had pad A, and then now it's just pad B, and it's been pad B since middle of 2022, I think. So whether they get A back online and then now they're firing, twice the cadence from New Zealand, that'd be great. But I think hopefully they do something similar with Neutron, where it's just like kind of like the bare bones infrastructure that they need to just get that first launch up, and then they kind of learn from that process and upgrade the pad as they upgrade the ship, kind of a deal over time.
Yeah. I also think that's normally how it's done, because the first rocket that you design is not the best version of the rocket, and then
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Next Rocket Lab news. This one was very, very interesting. as the developers of the world's first carbon composite or orbital launch vehicle, innovative I can't say this word, composite design and manufacturing is in our DNA. And so they basically opened up their carbon composite capabilities to other aerospace companies. And this is the website that is now available on rocketlab.com. And they show the machines that they have. And it's a whole sales page. What do you think about the... was I not sharing? Oh my God, I was not sharing. Okay, so here is the website on Rocket Lab. And so I'm curious, what did you think about this? And you're very into the numbers. I feel like this is a very significant announcement, but I have no clue for the top line, bottom line. What does it do with the numbers for us?
I don't know. I'm really not too sure. This is it was a boat racing building factory initially. I think one of the pictures there actually is no, I don't recognize those. I thought one of those three was the actual like in-house. So you can tell that Rocket Lab's taken it over. The middle one there.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
So that's like, they kind of took it over. The company that was there previously, they went to the UK, I guess. It's a bigger scene for those sail. I think the proper name for it is like Sail GP, like Racing League or something. So it's a lot bigger in the UK. So they kind of gave a sweetheart deal to Rocket Lab. And that's where Rocket Lab, from my understanding, was originally getting the composites for the Electron. So Rocket Lab's like, well, we're going to be building more Electrons here. So we're just going to, we'll love to take it off your hands. They kept a bunch of the staff on as well. And I guess all of that, like with them not building the sailboats there now, I guess there's a lot of additional capacity for them to be doling that out to everyone else. But at the same time, it's like, if they're expecting to be needing all that composites for like everything from spacecraft to neutron to Electron, it makes me wonder how much capacity they even have, or if it is just like the raw material that they're selling, or what that really looks like. I guess kind of have to wait and see.
Yeah. So we're in the too little data phase.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's potentially a new revenue stream, and it's something that they are able to do probably profitably, because the factory has been there. The whole line is grooved in. It's not new employees. It's an existing production line. I just have no clue how much demand there is from the aerospace industry for these carbon composites, because as far as I understood, Rocket Lab is quite unique that they use that on their rockets.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the fact that they can manufacture it a lot cheaper, or they can form it, because there is a reason why it's not being used in the rocket industry. And I think that it's maybe hard to work with this, or it's quite expensive to.
It makes me wonder too about that previous Lockheed Martin facility. It's now Rocket Lab's, what are they calling it? The Space Structures Complex. So its purpose is for composite rocket and satellite structure production. And more specifically, that's for, where was that? So it says, once up and running, the new complex will support development and manufacturing of carbon composite spacecraft buses. And keep in mind, this is for the Lockheed Martin's facility. So it's for spacecraft buses, structural panels, assemblies, satellite dispensers, aerostructures, heat shields, composite overwrap, pressure vessels, solar panel substrates, launch structures, and more. So it's kind of almost like surprising, or like like more questions than answers, really. Are they both like carbon factories now, or like is one more geared towards the neutron, and then the one in New Zealand, the Sail GP one, is this more like exclusive to Electron, and the overabundance goes to whoever wants it, kind of a thing? It's odd.
Yeah. there is a comment also here by Tanda Madison, which is quite true, that if you're, like if you have this factory and you're only producing for neutron and electron, and let's say that only takes half your capacity, then to sell the additional one is basically pure profit, because you still have to pay the employees. You have the same cost on, like, there's very little incremental cost on running the machines a little bit longer, Yeah. So good point. Let me see, what have we not covered yet? I'll just go through the. Oh yeah, here's almost the last one. So I was very curious when I saw this post. You actually tweeted this, that recent comments from Hawkeye's president led me to believe that the Rocket Lab launches have been moved over to SpaceX. So basically, it looks like maybe Rocket Lab has lost 2 contracts that were actually supposed to fly in Q2. What makes you think that this is the case, and how much of a loss is that for Rocket Lab if that did happen?
I guess it wouldn't be a huge amount. I guess it would be maybe 16 million total, because we're only expecting 2 additional launches. We had the first one already. I think that launched 3 of Hawkeye's satellites, with the subsequent 2 that we haven't seen yet supposed to be, well, I mean, it keeps getting pushed back. It was supposed to be cluster 6 and 7 or something like that. And it's to the point now we're expecting Rocket Lab to launch cluster 9 and 10. But specifically in this article, it mentions that cluster 9 and beyond is going to be, I mean, that's my understanding of it anyways, that it's going to be through SpaceX. So the original Hawkeye launches, what I'm seeing here is originally planned for the first half of 2023. Later is bumped to Q4 of 2023, then Q2 of 2024, and now it's just kind of like not sure, So just they keep getting pushed back, and there's no updates, and it's to the point where it's like, is this happening anymore, or has this just been adopted by SpaceX? I'm kind of leaning towards the latter.
Yeah. It's very curious. I was thinking about this, that Adam Spice mentioned when he spoke at a conference that they don't pay. It's not like they launch and then the customers pay the $8.1 million, because what I can understand is Electron is a dedicated launch for your satellite, but it has a higher kilogram to orbit price than than if you launch it on a SpaceX ride share mission. But the problem with the SpaceX ride share mission is that it maybe doesn't go into your inclination. You don't control when it launches. So maybe because as far as I know, the SpaceX is booked 2-3 years ahead, and they go into a specific inclination. So if you need your assets in orbit before, then you only have Rocket Lab to go to. And to cancel these contracts, because Peter Beck also mentioned that they don't do this backlog shenanigans, that when they report that they have 1 billion in backlog, it's he said non-cancelable, or how did he say it, like basically very serious contracts with like financial commitments behind. And because the launches, I mean, if you look in the NASA space flight, maybe I can even show it here. These launches are scheduled in June. So to cancel a launch so close to the launch date, I think they must have paid like 50%. And then how much cheaper is SpaceX that they're able to lose 50%, and then it's still better to launch on Rocket Lab? So not sure.
I think where they're getting that from, I think that's there was some document that was released from Hawkeye basically asking permission to launch, I think, the clusters 8 and 9 or 9 and 10, one or the other. And I think that's where they got that from. So because there was the news of like they're launching these 2 clusters expected to be in June and I think just like later in 2024. So I think that's what we're seeing here, is them making the assumption that, well, it must be Rocket Lab, right? But then, like I said more recently in that article, it mentioned that particular cluster to be on SpaceX. So I don't know if it's another cluster got bumped, or maybe like they get one down the road, or just like a top up launch kind of an idea, or not too
Yeah.
sure.
I guess again, one of those things where the Q2 earnings, maybe they will ask this specifically from Rocket Lab, like, did you lose these launches? Because yeah, it's curious. I mean, what I believe management when they say that they have never been they have never had a customer that was waiting for an Electron. Like it was always that the Electron was waiting for the customer. So I do believe that this delay with Hawkeye is not because of the Electron rocket. And if they quit the contract, then I'm 100% that the contract had like money involved that would still go to Rocket Lab. So maybe the financial blow of this would not even be the 16 million for the 2 launches, but maybe 8 million of revenue that we lose here.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So that was basically all the news. Now I'm very curious about your opinion, because we tweeted at each other before that according to this Next Spaceflight app, there is 7 launches in Q2, but you told me that this is not so reliable, and you guys is it Dave's Discord where you go more detailed into this?
There's like a couple discords, and it's like more or less the same guys. Yeti and Norm is how I know them, but they're like, we're constantly messaging back and forth, like, oh, I found a new one. Like, I shouldn't say we. It's usually them telling me. They're on the ball. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but a lot of the times they'll be like, hey, here's one, update your tracker. So I think the next space flight tracking is like a little bit of guesswork and a little bit of assumptions, whereas the one that I use, it's like if I don't have a reference for it, it's not going to be there, kind of an idea. So
Yeah.
it's like and yeah, like 7 launches, like maybe, but I don't think so. I think that's way too many, personally.
What do you have in your?
Um, well, we know Hawkeye for June for sure, but again, I don't know anymore. Well, first, I guess we have the NASA cased one that's later this month.
Yeah.
Ideally, unless it gets bumped back a little bit. But then aside from that, we have Hawkeye in June, hopefully. We have Kinese is slated for June, and that is it that we have for Q2 locked in. But there were a few other companies that are just in the gray zone. They were maybe originally going to be like in the contract, for example, like launched throughout 2023 to 2024. So we have a number of those launches that haven't seen the light of day yet. So I think we have who was it? Capella. I don't think we have an earlier one for. Could be Capella. Like, we're waiting on news from Capella, Synspective. I think Black Sky as well. And we could see another Haste. That's another thing that hasn't been announced, but I think will probably be announced soon. I think there's a couple more Haste launches this year that aren't public yet.
The Haste is very short term, right? It's short notice, right?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah.
The last one, I guess we've only had one so far, and it was like, I think literally a day before or 2
Launch
days
day.
before, something like that. Yes, it was like kind of somebody's like, hey guys, Wallops is closing like in 2 nights, and Rocket Lab is launching. What's going on? I don't think we found out about it till like the next day, kind of a thing. So yeah. But like, devil's advocate of that is the and granted it's changed a lot, but that launch manifest that they released for Q3, the next Haste launch was not supposed to be till 2024 Q3, I think it was. But if there were a couple added, maybe it was kind of like a last minute thing and is going to be squeezed into Q2. That would be nice to see. But I think 4 is a safe assumption for Q2. Maybe 5, hopefully 6, but 7 just seems too high for me, and I could be wrong. But
yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm happy with because I kind of understand from Adam Spice that it's very hard to predict the launches, because the customers have to be ready. So I'm happy as long as they're doing 4 or 5, because even like if they do 4 like every quarter, it's still 16 launches. It's still a major increase compared to the year before. I'm completely fine with that. And SpaceX is firing on all cylinders. Space Systems is firing on all cylinders. So I think that the company is still going to do fantastic, even if the launch side is not going to do what is it, 100% increase this year.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious now. There's a few last questions. You can let me know if you need to run.
I'm all good. Yeah, I've got a few more minutes.
Okay. So we know that they report, like Rocket Lab reports this backlog number, and I saw in one of your videos that you went through like the known items, and you were taking it out of the backlog list, and you came to this conclusion that they might be hiding a contract. And I'm curious if you could talk about that, and what do you think is the explanation for it? How big you think? I'm pretty sure we suspect that it's an Amazon contract for the Kuiper satellites, but curious to hear from you.
This is another one of those things where like I wish I had more to say. It just, there's so many different like moving parts, and when you put them all together, it's just kind of like, yeah, what's going on? So as you mentioned, like when Rocket Lab releases their earnings, not just the presentation, but the SEC file document, they always will, or often will, mention their backlog. And with that, they'll mention what kind of backlog they're expecting over the next 12 months, and then what kind of backlog they're expecting past that. So to make a long story short, you can isolate the number of launches out of that, leaving you with Space Systems. But the amount of backlog that is for Space Systems, after you exclude the big, like the MDA, the SDA, etc., there's nothing left. Meanwhile, they've built up a line in Auckland, New Zealand for these, their largest reaction wheels. And as far as the actual capacity, that's where it gets kind of weird, because they've mentioned that they're building capacity for 2,000 wheels per year, but they've also mentioned 3,000, and they've also mentioned, like, there's just been so many different mentions, and it's like, what is the actual number? What is the status? Who is this for? And it's just a big question mark on their backlog. It just seems like they've built something for like what will be a very large customer. Maybe it's even themselves. That's kind of maybe, well, I don't know. No, that wouldn't make sense either, because they have mentioned that it's for a customer. And actually, I think in the last earnings call, I think Adam Spice mentioned the next couple of quarters we'll know more about that. So if it is just reaction wheels, that's cool. But even if they were scaling other parts of the business to match the reaction wheels, like if they were building like what I guess would be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 spacecraft per year, that could just get nutty. That could just get crazy as far as the numbers go. Like even the reaction wheels themselves. And that's another thing where I've heard people arguing like, well, no, it's in there. They're just giving them a big discount because of how many they're building. And these reaction wheels are 100 to 100, the particular one that they build up the line for. It's $100,000 to $120,000 per wheel. And you multiply that by like even 1,000, but what they're saying is 2,000 or maybe even 3,000 per year. It's a significant number. As far as where that is and why that's not in the backlog, that's where it gets hazy, because like, would they, and this is just beyond my expertise, is like, my understanding is that they would have to announce that backlog, but they haven't. But we know that it's there, and nobody seems to press them on it during the calls. So it's like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm thinking because I also feel that if there is an actual binding contract, it would be really weird that they don't disclose it, even if the customer doesn't want it disclosed, right? Like they don't want to say that, because this I can buy that they sign a non-disclosure agreement, let's say with Amazon, and but then they still have, because the purpose of the bookkeeping and all these reports to the SEC is to give a real picture to investors so that they can make an educated decision on the company, right? And then to leave out hundreds of millions of dollars of contract from your backlog, it feels like you're not giving the investors the chance to make an educated decision. And I feel that would go against some sort of a law. But what if the agreement that they had is like, it doesn't, like, let's say it's a little bit more than a letter of intent, but it's not a binding agreement yet. So it doesn't hit the qualifications to be included, but they're like very sure that it's coming.
That's what I was going to say, like some sort of like waterfall setup. Like, I mean, if it is the Amazon things, they just recently tested their first Kuiper satellite. So I'm wondering if it's like, okay, so the setup is we'll send the first like test satellites to orbit, and after 6 months or whatever the kind of agreement is, as long as everything's good, then we're, then the box is ticked, and now it's like, okay, now it's announced. Because if that is the case, like that's like, I mean, that's like kind of like the hyperbole case, really. Like, I know that everyone's looking at Rocket Lab like, neutron, but it's like, if it is the reaction wheels alone, this is going to be significant. And if they're building not just the reaction wheel, but the whole spacecraft for whoever, it's going to like run the numbers. It gets pretty nutty.
Yeah. Christopher Bell says it's not Amazon, it's probably SpaceX. I always hate when, like, I would not like SpaceX to be a customer at Rocket Lab, because I feel that whenever something gets too big for SpaceX, they just in-house it,
Mm-hmm,
so I feel that they're like, they are like, I would like to see, like, of course I'm happy if they get new contracts, but I would like to see them get custom, like, because like on Amazon, that they're not going to open a satellite manufacturing facility to in-house it from Rocket Lab, right? But on SpaceX, that, let's say they buy for 100 million, it's not such a big amount for Musk, but once the amount goes to like 1 billion, 2 billion, then Musk is going to go like, we have a better way, and F these guys, we're opening the factory over here, and goodbye, like on 2 days notice. And yeah, cool. One last question in closing. So the stock price is at almost all-time lows. What is your prediction for the stock price? Do you think we are fairly priced, underpriced? Can the stock price go much lower? I'm curious what you think.
This is where I'll become a contrarian, especially on this program. But I've long held the opinion, less so now, that Rocket Lab is overvalued. So I bought around, it's just after
overvalued.
Sorry?
Overvalued. Okay. That's interesting.
Well, what I should say is like kind of in the way that Tesla's overvalued. It's like, or like, I mean, any company, you could argue, sure, they're overvalued because stuff that hasn't happened yet is priced in already. But with Rocket Lab, to kind of rewind a bit, like I owned Rocket Lab, and then I sold out because it was like, it went to like $15-20, and like there you can make a fair argument. Yeah, it's overvalued.
Yeah.
And then after their, I continued to watch them after that, kind of them and Astro, to kind of get a better price. And it was right after the Investor Day 2022 presentation. And I'm like, I could make an argument that it's a little bit overvalued, but it's one of those things where I just wanted to have a position just to, like, kind of not miss out. And if it goes down, great, I'll build the position. And that's kind of like what's happened. But at the time, I'm like, $4, it's a little overvalued here. And now that's been like almost 2 years. And it's like, at the time, the argument was like, okay, the Neutron is partially priced in and it could get delayed, and this and that could happen. And it kind of has. But like, you see the stock now at $4, and I'm kind of like, well, I mean, what is it now? Like $3.75 and falling? Like,
yeah.
It's very tempting to to add, like right now, my position is like, I haven't checked lately, but it's between like 5 and 10% of my overall portfolio. I'd love to build it to be, even north of 20, but at the right price. And
very curious, what is that price for you?
To add?
Yeah.
I think we're going to hit a new all-time low.
All right.
I know it's not what you want to hear, but I think that at this point, it is at the point where if we did get that static fire test, cause everybody's expecting like, oh, it's going to be the next big thing. I would not be surprised if that's a sell the moment kind of event. And yeah, you get enough people expecting this big hike, it might do the opposite. But that being said, I'm not waiting for an all-time low to buy again. I'm pretty like this past week, I'm like, I think I should add here. We'll see what happens. It's one of those things. I have a decent position. I'm not rushing. The world seems to be falling apart, so I'm just kind of sitting on cash right now and with fingers crossed,
Yeah. Cool. We have a last comment here. I'm an aerospace engineer. Do you all understand how difficult engine development is? I don't know if we truly do, but I know it's difficult. So cool. I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I think it was a very insightful. It was a very good time to come on. It was a lot of news to discuss.
It's a good week for it.
Contracts. Yeah. And if you want, you can come back and be on the show. You have an open invitation from me.
Cool.
And based on the comments, the audience also liked you very much. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week. And all of Scott's data is in the description box below. Please make sure you follow him on YouTube and on Twitter. And see you, everyone, next week. Ciao, ciao.